space and try to figure out what they're saying. Sometimes that's how it goes, because sometimes poems are hard to like analyze and interpret. I can also give you feedback if you want. And then that being said, just sort of the normal things we go through, I have a playlist on my YouTube that is the Poets of Twitch, and has a whole bunch of analysis from a whole bunch of my chatters and also like professional published poets that they've sent in for my reading and analysis and whatever, right? So yeah, maybe short analysis critique. My productivity time is starting soon, and yes, you can add them to the playlist. Awesome. Okay. A nostalgia you can't place, a memory too hard to chase. All that's left is the aftertaste of a lingering feeling. Beautiful. A nostalgia you can't place, a memory too hard to chase. All that's left is the aftertaste of a lingering feeling. Okay. Trying to get these things to be properly the right size. Okay. A nostalgia you can't place, a memory too hard to chase. All that's left is the aftertaste of a lingering feeling. So, short poems are interesting. I haven't like analyzed anything like this on stream. And we were talking about weight earlier, and structure, and how things sort of sit in a poem. And the only thing I've thus far underlined is aftertaste. This is the most interesting word to me in the entire poem, if that makes sense. A nostalgia you can't place, a memory too hard to chase. All that's left is the aftertaste of a lingering feeling. This is extremely sensory, right? And we've talked about that before. One way to really engage with like interest of the viewer or the reader is oftentimes to use our five senses, right? It kind of sounds like the Cheers theme song. I don't know the Cheers theme song. And welcome, Mick Vanoch. How are you doing? So, five senses are like always things that can catch the reader's eye and often catch my eye or ear. Is they just have a lot more relatability, a lot more weight to them. So I really like that, and that makes this feel almost like sort of the crux or the center, go back, of this poem. Like, the first two lines. A nostalgia you can't place, a memory hard to chase. They're very abstract. Beautifully abstract, right? But they don't say a ton on their own. A nostalgia you can't place, a memory too hard to chase. I mean, many if not everyone here understands that feeling of not quite remembering why something is familiar to us, or why we enjoy it, or where we recognize it from, right? And then all that's left is the aftertaste. This is the first line, right? That's very like grounded and tells me something, and then of a lingering feeling. So in a sense, if I had to talk about like the structure of this poem, or the tension and release, the poem starts and it immediately starts to build tension, because things that are not resolved, things that we do not know, things that are abstract, tend to provide tension. If you look at music, some of the most tense and like jarring music is the stuff that isn't very grounded. It's the very avant-garde, hammering away on a piano that gives you this feeling of not knowing where you are. And in that sense, it's fitting for the poem, because we're both the subject, the nostalgia and the memory, is the subject is unknown, right? And we also talk about, we have this language of camping in the place hard to chase. Nothing very grounded, very abstract, and it creates a lot of tension, which is beautiful, right? And then all that's left is the aftertaste. And it feels like the tension comes down here. Aftertaste is a sensory word. It gives us some amount of grounding, which also again makes sense. We're talking about this nostalgia, and we have a little bit, a tiny touch of the taste that we're trying to describe, then that is something that can ground us and give us some amount of like memory or prompting as to where we are in our memory, right? And then of a lingering feeling. So if we wanted this poem to resolve and get to a point of no tension, let's say green, right? This is not the line we would use. All that's left is the aftertaste of, if I was going to fill in a line, your kiss. Listen to how differently the poem sounds when I do your kiss. A nostalgia you can't place, a memory too hard to chase. All that's left is the aftertaste of your kiss. It ends, it's final, right? It wraps up. Or yours, a nostalgia you can't place, a memory too hard to chase. All that's left is the aftertaste of a lingering feeling. Structurally, we brought the tension up, and then we started to bring the tension back down, right? And we could have resolved the poem, but instead we said of a lingering feeling. And in that sense, we brought the tension right back up to where it was. That's what we do. And I think that's like we have very different opinions of abstract law. Fair enough. I would love to hear your opinions on abstract. I would love to hear, especially in a short poem like this that doesn't have too much content, other people's thoughts and things that you notice and think, right? So this is a way that I like to look at poems and think about how they work, right? Is tension and release. Anytime you lean into tension, you're gonna have that like deep emotion and or an unsettled feeling or anything, right? And then as you have release, you know, that's when you get something more stable, more just sort of potentially normal writing. I talk about tension and release. Talked about it another day, I think. I talked about it in that, but I'm not going to... Okay, it's actually in a poem that I'm not going to share right now. It was Nico's poem, because there's some, like, trigger warning stuff. Beautiful sunset falling from a darkened sky, forever lost now. I mean, yes, that is certainly purely abstract language. Beautiful sunset falling from a darkened sky, forever lost now. I mean, I disagree with you. I don't think that's abstract. And I mean, you did say we have different opinions of abstract, but you say beautiful sunset falling from a darkened sky. You're literally painting an image of a sunset falling below the horizon from a darkening sky. Forever lost now. The sunset ends, and then the sky becomes dark. Right? To me, abstraction is meaning that is not evident, or but you're not writing about an actual sunset. I mean, sure. And in that case, yes, you have created a metaphor, and metaphor, okay. Metaphor is abstraction. It is taking something, let's say a feeling, right, and abstracting a level away from it. So in this sense, yes, that is one way to speak of abstraction. I think I'm referring to literally the language and the stuff described here as abstract or not grounded, where you quite literally have a very grounded description of a sunset. Whereas this, a nostalgia you can't place, a memory too hard to chase. There is no... In a sense, there's none of this. 5 senses. You see the sunset. You have colors. You have motion. And so abstract is an abstract concept, abstract thing, where yes, you talking about a sunset is abstraction in the sense that it is using something, using the sunset as an abstraction. However, the actual language of the sunset and the scene you write is not in itself abstract because it's describing something literal, right? You could also have abstract language, a nostalgia you can't place, a memory too hard to chase, where we don't exactly know what this is talking about. And we sort of know it's talking about a memory. But let's say this entire thing was then a metaphor, an abstraction for something completely different. I'm getting spammed by cheap viewers on. I don't want your cheap viewers. I have free viewers. They're amazing and they're friendly and they're cool. To pull up like this weird tiny little keyboard. Ban. That one already got close. See, I got 3. Y'all only got 2. Because one of them got restricted. Unfettered. I hate how the bots have, like, really good names. You know? Did I do it right? I'm trying to ban something that doesn't exist. Unfettered minor. That's why. Sounds much less interesting. Minor. This is like... There we go. And then systemic vase. See, that's like whatever. Flash ban. Systemic. Okay. Unfettered Miner sounds like a dope dwarf title. That is so true. Like having some dwarven hero who is like, you know, I'm just gonna use Brunor, which is like one of the D&D like Dungeons and Dragons in lore dwarves. Brunor Unfettered Miner. That would be a good title. So there's also an ad coming, right? I know, right? Okay. And so yeah, in a sense, like, I think these 4 lines do an excellent job of really taking us through like that feeling of not being able to remember, because we also get the aftertaste, build this tension, we feel like we're gonna have it, and then we just realize all we're tasting is something that we don't know. And I think that's awesome. I think in 4 lines, in a sense, you've captured sort of on 2 levels or more of what you're talking about. And like, that's awesome, right? It's simple, but I think it's very like effective, and it gave us a good little conversation about abstraction. And now there's going to be another ad break where none of you are going to watch the thing. You're going to stand up, you're going to go do self-care for the ad break and not let your time be commodified, and then we'll look at the next poem, and then maybe we'll talk about titles for them. Arson Asher, you have to go. Well, have a good one. Have a good sleep. Have a good day at school tomorrow. And thanks for sharing the poetry. Yes. Love having you share your poems. It's really awesome. And I'm going to stand up and stretch, because there's going to be an ad. And a few of you get to watch anyway. Yeah. Assuming because one of my Texas girl pronouns are she, her. Sort of. I would say I'm like most comfortable lately with she, her, and I'm trans femme, and a trans girl is normally how I identify, but I also am not wholly attached to just like identifying as purely one side of a gender binary that I've already like rejected as a trans person. So in that case, like, I tend to use all pronouns, but like she is what most people use for me, and then some people use they as well, right? So I wouldn't, and then if someone called me he, I don't really care, right? Would I prefer that? What would I prefer? Use she, her, I guess, is fine. If you want to use they, them, if I'm giving they, them, if you want to call me he, like, I don't know. I prefer what you prefer. Whatever makes you feel comfy. You know, if I'm giving, like, he, him on a certain day, if my fit looks mask, call me he, him, I don't care. I probably think the same. Okay, sitting back down. Welcome, Salty Sarcasm, and you're lurking. Have I ever played Life is Strange Before the Storm or Life? So I've not played Life is Strange. I get very Steph vibes from those games. I'm like familiar. I know there's like a couple girls, and maybe they're lesbian. I don't know. But I should. And there are some games that I want to play on stream. Welcome back, Baking Official. At some point, you know, but for now I do a lot of writing. Every so often I play Magic the Gathering on stream, but Those sort of story-based games, Life is Strange. I feel like a game that I could really enjoy on stream is like Disco Elysium. Uh, but anything that like lets me engage with stories and show stories, and even doing something like almost like analyzing or talking about stories, is a good thing. Also, this poem we didn't really critique. Um, which something I always encourage. Everyone, listen up. If you take away one lesson from my stream, it's this: critique everything. Everything you read, critique it. It doesn't matter if you are reading one of the most renowned American poets of our recent time, or if you are reading an incredible, I don't know, Russian author who wrote a bunch of amazing stuff, or if you're reading Kafka, who's like apparently good enough to have a book that looks like this, or like Neruda, or anyone else, right? Critique. This is going to help you understand what you like about things, what you don't like about things, and why. And that is going to inform your own art immensely. It will also help your fellow artists, if you are critiquing to them directly. Telling someone that was good is like every artist's worst nightmare. No one wants to share their work and hear, oh, yeah, your work was good, right? You know? But if you like something, say why. If you don't like something, say why. So, in a sense, I've told you what I like and why I like a lot of these things, and that is critique. Saying why I like something is a start. But then saying, what would I change here? Right? Now, and it can also just be giving ideas or options, right? I really liked how, it sort of felt like it built this tension and then sort of had a non-resolution, right? You could do more with your non-resolution, even in a short space. I don't mean more literally, just like ideas. And don't just like take any of these at my word, but like, let's say, like, resolve it less. We already know that we're sort of remembering something lingering in our past, right? And that we don't exactly like, that it's there, but it's not, right? And in a sense, that makes this a little redundant. It's redundant in a good way, right? Because it calls back to this tension that we built and then didn't resolve. But let's say we did this. A nostalgia you can't place. A memory too hard to chase. All that's left is the aftertaste of ... ellipsis. Maybe you like that, maybe you don't, right? It could be of question mark. Of A. Or, you could do all that's left is the aftertaste ... lingering. That's completely different. A nostalgia you can't place. A memory too hard to chase. All that's left is the aftertaste lingering. Interesting, right? You could do something even weirder. A nostalgia you can't place. A memory too hard to chase. All that's left is the aftertaste of a nostalgia you can't place. If we want to full on like restart the tension, you can do that. it's an option, right? Although something that I really do like, that works with your tension here, which I didn't even talk about, I didn't even notice until now somehow. You have your rhyme scheme. These all rhyme wonderfully, and they set you up for wanting the resolution, right? And you leave it unresolved beautifully. So you having the fourth line of the unresolved rhyme scheme, something I didn't even comment about before, which I think is awesome, right? There are so many things in poetry that set up expectation, right? And I mean, yeah, you're glad I've noticed. You're glad I noticed, but even though I didn't like notice or consciously mention it, I felt the unfinishedness, and the rhyme scheme delivered that before I even like processed it, which is excellent. But so many things in poetry create expectations that we can subvert or we can lean into, right? And in this case, we set up expectations with rhymes, right? That is a wonderful way. You know, a sonnet, right? If we're doing iambic pentameter. At first, I give you a line with rhyme A, and then I take it to another, and then I take it to the side, say B, but you know what to think is coming. I fail to improvise sonnet here. I'm normally very good at improvising such rhyme schemes because they're simple and they're expectations and your brain wants to fill them in. The first rhyme that I give you is the A, but then I'll take you off to the left side. And now you know what's coming next, I say. You want me to say a word that does rhyme. Rhyme sort of rhymes with side. It's a near rhyme. Bear with me. But you know, like, you feel how it wants to go that way. So rhyme schemes are an excellent way to set up that. It's okay. I have to think about sonnets really hard. The stress and unstress throw me. They come really naturally for me. It's weird. I was like straight up improvising sonnets and stuff. Will I be able to read stuff today? The first page and a half, so I need something weird. Since I do something weird, I needed feedback. Yeah. Is there a certain time when you have to like log off, leave Twitch? I can probably do it after these, and I think that's sort of the order that people submit in things, unless I'm like cutting someone by doing that. But I, you know, as long as it's all like fair and no one's disagreeable, right? You're here for a while? Okay. Yeah, I'll do it today. As long as I have the energy. I spent a lot of time for the last 2.5 months. I think Mel was next anyway. Okay. I spent a lot of time in the last 2.5 months burning myself out and streaming too much. So if I am tired, stopping stream. But you know, there's at least another hour of stream scheduled. I like to do 4 hours, and we can also push it a little bit since I'm feeling good today, right? But we can set up expectation with rhyme. We can set up expectation with structure. Just like the actual presentation of the poem, right? Let's say I have a page, and I wrote a poem, and I do some interesting stuff with indentation, right? What time is it for me? Asking because it seems like the sun is setting and it's 12 a.m. Oh my gosh. That's late. 12 a.m. No. It is, y'all can actually, well, maybe you can't see it. It's 3:04 p.m. The actual composition of the page, right? So let's say we're doing some weird things with indents, and this is the shape of our poem, right? And then we have something right justified, and an indent, and then like this. I've created an expectation. You probably, if you're paying attention, filled in where you want the next line to go on this page because I made a pattern. So I'm going to put the next line here, right? I subverted it. um, Troll them, exactly. You can troll people in your poems. Trolling people is an excellent approach to poetry. Um, so that's a way to set up expectations, right? You can do it through the actual words. Let's say we do a counting poem. Let's say we have a poem where we're saying like something something based on the number one. We have one of this, something something, very Seussian, and then we say like, oh, two of these, and then we talk more about how there's two things, right? And then we say there's three, right? Because that usually sets up a pattern. I'll talk about that in a second, what I mean. And then we say 5. Now, technically, we maybe just did Fibonacci 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. It is a pattern still, right? But let's say we did 73 next, right? Or 78. Now we're just being confusing, right? Whenever I can't think of them, I write the dumbest thing I can think of. At least I can laugh about it later. Exactly. And I mentioned a pattern starting at 3. So if you want to establish a pattern, you need to have 3 things, right? So, and that's why I think this poem works very well. Place, chase, aftertaste. Setting up 2 things. A nostalgia you can't place. A memory too hard to chase. My mind doesn't necessarily lock on to having a rhyme in the next line, right? Because I've only had 2. It's not a pattern yet. That's just kind of how brains work a lot of the time. All that's left is the aftertaste. Now we have a pattern. There's 3. And then my next line of a lingering feeling, and it drops us off and doesn't give us that resolution, right? So when you're trying to set up a pattern, you need to make sure you're doing it right. Let's say I did the same thing here. Line, and then an indented line. And then I have like a space. And then I have another line, and we're saying, what do I fill in the poem next, right? I mean, there's nothing really in my brain saying to, like, make this a pattern, right? It just feels like, oh, well, I could do this, and that would be fine, and then maybe later I do something else, and it's like, it's just style. But here I've done 1, 2, 3, I made a pattern. I don't think I was even intending to do it like that. And then we broke the pattern. Now, these are really great things you can play with. There's a lot of like psychology that our brain just fills things in when we're reading or when we're consuming media, and that's why subversion of these expectations can be like powerful and used, right? And you did, and it was awesome, right? So that, right? Kind of, what other ways? Does anyone else have ways that we can play with people's expectation? Rhymes, structure, the actual words having a pattern. I don't know if there's anything else I can think of. I'm so glad my poem inspired a discussion about expectation and pattern. I'm glad your poem inspired a discussion about expectation and pattern. That's why you read people's things and talk about it, because it inspires things. Thank you, I feel so honored for your thorough analysis, truly. Thank you for sending it. None of this would have happened if you didn't send it, right? This is a 2-person job right here, Hey, okay. That's another way. Oh, someone followed. Thank you, Viking. So this 2-person job, I just said that in conversation, that's an idiom, right? And thank you for the follow, Mick Vanoch. I appreciate it. Two-person job is an idiom. It is something we fill in. And we can subvert common phrases, right? So if I say, what's a good one? The apple doesn't fall far from the creek. You know, subversion, right? Because we're expecting someone to say, we can stop. We can say the apple doesn't fall far from the, which is like unfinished and weird. That's one thing you can do. You can say, the apple doesn't fall far. That's an interesting line, right? You could stop it there. You could say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. You could say, the apple doesn't fall far from the something else. You could say, kill two birds with one, use a different word, right? Like, you can use idiom and the things that our brain expects us to fill in to subvert our expectations. That movie with Paul Rudd and I forgot his name, the guy who plays Michael in The Office, Steve Carell. No. I'm really uncultured in terms of movies and film, so if you want to find the name and like make that a media recommendation, because like I did actually watch a film that someone recommended in my chat and also start listening to a podcast. The film being I Saw the TV Glow, which Arson Asher recommended, and Stylish Fail sent me the Silt Verses, which I need to continue. So if you actually send me that, maybe I'll watch it. But yeah, exactly, right? Getting an idiom and quote wrong is a really interesting subversion. And you can also just use them normally, or you can use them wrong ironically, or you can use them wrong to point at the irony of using them ironically. That's meta irony. Layers, right? Poetry's like onions and ogres. So, but yeah, so I gave you a lot of other ideas of basically how you can mess with this like scheme, giving almost no line, saying of subverts it because we want an entire another line. I mean, we like things in sets of fours, right? There's a poem that I wrote that let me perform a poem for you all. It's been a while since I read this, and it does it in a very simple, straightforward way, where it's just this like unfinished idea, which I think works really well in my poem called The Fate of Flowers. So this sounds like this, right? The Fate of Flowers. Where will you be, I ask, as I kiss the ground? Where will you be in a season, or 2, or 20? I ask, as I bury you. This beginning I would wish upon nobody. Conceived in the dark. Worse, conceived in pleasure. Your mother is kind. Will you endure her anger? I ask as I cry over graves. Your father lies above. Will you reach him? Those quotes are backwards. I ask as I stand to go. I hope you climb past the sky to meet everyone. Let me tell you one last thing. You know, there's no rest of the poem. And this is something where if I put it in like a publication, which like if I ever made a poetry collection, this would go in it. This is one of my favorite poems ever. I would have the ellipses at the bottom, like have this take up the full page, and then have a blank page afterward. That's sort of the setup of this poem. Just have like a completely left blank for artistic purposes page. That's nice. Dang, snap, so beautiful. Thank you. I appreciate it. I just remembered some of my schoolmates finding my poetry I wrote back in school and making fun of it. But whenever I post a story nowadays, I usually get a lot of praise for it. Well, I don't know if the new poem is any good, especially in English, but I hope it's decent. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really unfortunate how sharing poetry and writing poetry and being vulnerable with your emotions is something that is very often like made fun of, looked down upon in a lot of places, and a lot of like just modern culture, I would say. I don't think it's even like place specific. It's happened to me. Arsen Asher told a similar story like a week ago of when he's just very new to writing poetry. And I told him to take a notebook or a piece of paper everywhere to write ideas down if you have ideas for poems, because that's gonna like always have you be living this artistic life. I go through notebooks like once every couple months. I have these tiny little notebooks and I put them in this leather like sleeve, and there's so many, right? And like he got made fun of for doing that, or like laughed at, I think. And it's like, dang, like that's messed up. Why do we do that? So I think part of like why I like stream sappy, sometimes like emotional, sometimes like vulnerable things on Twitch is because this is a place where, you know, it's not a setting that's like where you normally do that stuff. So I think it's a really interesting way to engage with that and sort of popularize or normalize it. In my poems, I usually tend to express how I myself feel nowadays. Makes them come to me more naturally. You redeemed hydrate. I will drink water. I've been yapping a lot, that's true. I think it's funny how the last ad break was like 20 minutes ago now, and I'm like, okay, ad break, and then we'll look at this poem, right? Water is good for yapping, yes. Y'all know how to keep me yapping. And then we had our whole expectation discussion. And now there's an ad break soon. But there's actually another poem that I have that plays with expectations, and I don't like sharing my poems like that much, but I was also supposed to like go to an open mic tonight, and then that got canceled, so now I want to read, right? It's called Singularity. And it does it completely differently, and I'm not going to show it to you all. So, Singularity. He walked down the not quite right angled steps as modern Archimedes, seeking a private eureka, not in the pool, but the reflecting waters of their eyes. Why did he hope to see himself? Parallel converging sidewalks anticipate connection. Narcissus sprinting toward an ideal self. Did he see the ripples left behind? Around the parabolic hairpin, the inflection point stopped him. Cartesian logic fled like the changing seasons, a clarity not seen until thought. If he does not think, what is he? Pupils absorb all conception and event horizon in one gaze. All axioms seem to lose fidelity. No theory reproduces feeling. When did nature take control? Suddenly, sweeping like the subtle blue gradient above. Drifting leaves can't fight currents. Let go. Figures rush back with a goodbye, hoping to approximate, eyes meeting again. Singularity. So that's one where, I have a big pause, and that's not something that I can, not an expectation I can subvert just on the page. I have these brackets here for the space. You had hella trolled, yes. When I perform it, I try to wait for someone to clap or snap. But I do a couple other things. A clarity not seen until thought. If he does not think, what is he? That's Descartes. I think, therefore I am. And I mention, Cartesian, Descartes, right? And there's like a lot of that in this one. Also, contradiction, parallel converging sidewalks, not possible. So there's actually kind of a lot of that in this poem, right? And then, of course, the actual troll, right? So there's lots of ways you can use expectation and the brains of your listeners to make your poems better, right? Also, we have an ad starting soon. But there was also a message earlier from Mick, which I need to read when I get back. But I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'm going to drink. Don't watch the ad. Don't let your life be monetized. And then we'll do the other poem, actually, right? So, I'll be right back. Enjoy your ad break. Self-care ad break. Hello, and welcome. I'm back on twitch.tv/2/3 lotus. Earlier, Mick, you said you're currently going through a very difficult time, and writing haikus is how you're getting through it. I think that was the lotus, yeah. 2/3 lotus. I just wanted to subvert some expectation there. Yeah, I think poetry is a really incredible way to, get through things that are really hard, right? And haikus are beautiful. I could give a whole long spiel about haikus. I could spend a 4-hour stream trying to write one haiku. I think they're really hard. But yeah, I mean, yesterday on stream, I started by it was basically about a cry. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm bad at streaming. I don't want to do this. Coming off of taking a break from burnout and being I need to take a longer break. And I just sat down and I just wrote. I basically didn't talk to anyone on stream for the first hour while I just wrote this poem, and it helped me, right? Because art and poetry and music and games and sport and family and reading. Look, another random book from nearby. I have about 10 books within reach. And film and it's all, and Twitch streams sometimes. Those things are good, right? He sent me another poem. Oh my gosh. I was in the middle of writing fantasy series when it happened. Yeah. It's definitely, it can be very good to sort of diverge and go to a medium that is not your normal artistic outlet. And sometimes that can be a really good way, right, to actually deal with emotion, right? I could just read it out and move on. If I want to move on to the next one, that's maybe a good idea. We can definitely talk about this another time if you remind me. I might not remember, but so we had this poem, which I'll read it again. I always like to say, one of the best parts for me is just enjoying and reading the poem. All the analysis, all the discussion, all of this nonsense is great, but you also just reading the poem is so fun. So I always like to just read it again afterward, after I've done all the analysis, and try to take what I've found and what's good about it and exaggerate it, but also just for enjoyment, right? A nostalgia, you can't place a memory too hard to chase. All that's left is the aftertaste of a lingering feeling. I still have a little bit of energy from my last poem. That's maybe not fitting for this poem, right? I got very heated because singularity is like that. So you could also read it. A nostalgia you can't place, a memory too hard to chase. All that's left is the aftertaste of a lingering feeling. There's so many ways to read something. It's really cool. Thank you for the care you put into sharing poetry. Of course, and thank you for sharing poetry that you put care into. To flip that one right back on you. No, I think poetry is something we put a lot of care and effort into, and it's my responsibility, I would say, if I'm sharing someone else's poetry and analyzing it and trying to pick it apart, to give it a lot of care. If I can't do that, then I'm absolutely doing them a disservice, doing their work a disservice, doing myself a disservice, and probably being just like mean, right? So, so yeah, I mean, thank you for recognizing the care that I put into sharing poetry. Um, but yeah, we didn't get to a title. Um, could be untitled. I hate untitled poems. This is a poem that I would untitle. You could call it abstract. You know, you could call it nostalgia. Like, an option for a title is just take a word in the poem and use it. Um, Something funny you could do is have something that like completes the rhyme scheme. Face, you know, like remembering a face. That would it would feel like you want that to be the end and the resolution. Um, yeah, you could leave it just without title. I always struggle. Yeah, I don't like naming things untitled. Um, yeah, that is definitely true. Um, I agree with that. You could name it like five underscores. That being said, this untitled poem about memory and remembering, which was by, oh my gosh, I didn't even write it on here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Liza Rise Up. That's totally like that is a good ring, you know? Liza Rise Up. That's probably intentional. Why is this not finishing? Slant rhyme, you know. Okay, yeah. You please. Oh, there it is. Rise up. Okay. Liza, rise up. No, it's great. Um. So that being said, I'm going to come back to it.